this video, we hope to define the word proportional, which is also referred to as direct variation, give you some examples, notation, and help you work with that when you find it in a word problem. So the idea or the meaning of two items that are proportional is that they have a multiplication relationship with one another. So let's say one item is a multiple of another. So the constant, that's what you multiply by, and it is often K. The shorthand notation looks kind of like an alpha, but not exactly. So I'm bad at drawing it. I have it typed on the next page so that you can see it. So it's kind of like that. Some people were skilled at making it all at once, like that. Okay, so similar to an alpha, but not exactly. The difference between direct and inverse. So the word proportional itself goes with direct, and direct is when both items get bigger. So I'll give you examples in just a moment. And in order to set up both items getting bigger with algebra, this is where you're going to use multiply. So this fits what we've been writing on this entire screen. However, some things have an inverse relationship. And so for this, one item gets bigger and one gets smaller. And again, I'll give you some examples, but mathematically, in order for that to happen, you're going to have to divide. Our focus is on the direct. However, we will see an example of the inverse as well, so that you can just tell them apart, even though our focus will be on the direct. So some examples. So these are examples of direct variation. That means if one item gets bigger, so does the other. So one is your pay and your hours worked. So if you get an hourly rate, the more hours you work, the more pay you get. One goes up, the other goes up. And there's a multiply there because you take your hours worked and you multiply them by your pay rate, and that calculates your pay. And so it's a multiplication relationship. Another example is distance and speed. So if you have a constant time, the faster you go, the farther you go, right? But you do have to work with a constant time. So if you have 10 minutes of running, if you run faster, you go farther. Okay. And another one, this is a very geometry one, but just to show you that you've been working with this idea throughout your math history, is the radius of a circle and the area. And this one is special because area is squared, and so it uses the radius squared, but there's still a multiplication relationship there, and that multiplier is pi, which is one of the constants that you learned back in geometry class. So you can just picture, if you draw a circle with a bigger radius, it encompasses a bigger area. And so they have this direct relationship that when one gets bigger, so does the other one. Now, there's also inverse. And so sometimes we think about quantities and one goes up and one goes down. And so that's inverse. So just to give you an example of inverse, if we think about time and speed. So if you have a constant distance, like your commute from home to your college, if your speed goes down because you're stuck behind a horse and buggy, your time to get here is going to go way up. However, if your speed goes up, so you are not in rush hour traffic, then your time goes down. It doesn't take you as long. And so these two have that inverse relationship. They always work opposite of one another. We're going to not spend nearly as much time on the inverse, but I just want you to know it exists. We are going to be focusing on that proportional or direct variation relationship as we're writing functions this week. So we have our first example here, and in the title of the slide, it says sales tax is proportional to the price paid. And we see that is proportional to there as the symbol. So I told you it's kind of like an alpha, but that's the proportional symbol. When I am taking something that is given to me in words, I want to model the words and the algebra, mimic each other 100%. And so we have to assign letters, and we're told here to use K for the constant of proportionality. So I'm going to say sales tax gets the letter S, and I have is proportional to, and price paid is going to get the letter P for price. So when I go to write my equation, I always start on the left, just like we read left to right. So I start on the left, sales tax. And then we define that this proportional concept is a multiplier by a constant number. So sales tax equals K times P. And that is always the model for the proportional relationship. It's always a multiply. It's always K times. You always go in the same order that the words are there. So in practical terms, what would this K represent? Well, that would be your tax rate. So if we are in Pennsylvania doing our shopping and we have a taxable item, it's 6%. So we would take 6% as a decimal and we multiply it by the price, and that's going to give us our sales tax that we're going to owe. So it's asking us to write an equation specific for Pennsylvania. So to do that, we're going to say the way you calculate sales tax. We're going to replace the K, the constant, by that tax rate, 0.06, and then you multiply that by the price. And so I don't have to use a symbol for multiplication, but I could. So we could use parentheses there, we can use a dot there. So there's a lot of different ways that you can write that. And because of that, I made picking out the equation a multiple choice question in your homework because there's so many ways that you can write it. But you want to be able to do that without the multiple choice. Now our last bullet point here says in New York I made a purchase for $60. I paid an additional $4.80 in sales tax. What is the sales tax rate in New York? Well, I'm going to go back to my original formula up here at the beginning. And I'm going to fill in numbers. So the sales tax, the board problem told me was $4.80. The tax rate is what I don't know. Sorry, to a plus I meant, but okay. So I don't know that tax rate. I'm going to let that be K. And it says the purchase price here is $60. So I have this equation, 4.80 equals K times 60. In order to solve that equation, I have to do a little bit of algebra. So algebra requires that I divide as the opposite of multiply. So I'm going to divide by 60 on both sides. The 60s cancel, so K equals. I'm going to put this part here in my calculator, so 4.80 divided by 60, and I get 0.08. And I could change it to a percent. So I would answer this, that is 8% sales tax in New York. That's why people come and shop at the outlets in Pennsylvania, because immediately